Hello, I'm Marilou McPhedran. I'm an independent senator for Manitoba and a longtime international human rights lawyer. And I am honored to be here today with colleagues, with people that have stood with courage and principle, and to have placed on the record the response, in some cases the lack of response from the Canadian government, and to draw some comparisons. I will begin by making just one comparison at this point, and that is to look at both the action and the words spoken by the Australian Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, when she received in person Australian citizens, women, who have reported very severe treatment. You will hear more about that from our guests today, and went on to activate an investigation, a formal police investigation. And I would just invite you to compare that to what is happening in Canada so far, both with the Foreign Minister, Anita Anand, and also the Prime Minister, Mark Carney. Without further ado, I would like to introduce someone that I have known for years and worked with on the issue of the genocide against the Rohingya in Myanmar, and also the entrenched, protracted discrimination against the Rohingya population in Bangladesh, particularly in Cox's Bazar, in the camps there. I've been in the camps. I also know and have worked with Ko's aunt in Bangladesh as well as at the Yuen. So I am very honored and I'm very relieved to see him here today recovering from what he has experienced. And so I would like to, at this point, I will introduce people as they are going to speak, but we have two survivors with us today, Ko Toming and also Marie Tota. Let us begin, please, with Ko.
Would you like to give my just introduction?
Yeah, just introduction.
Okay. Hello, I am Tinmaung. I am one of the participants in Global Simul Flotilla. I'm also a Rohingya, as Senator McPhedran mentioned. I've had the privilege of being at press conferences and other meetings with her when the genocide of my people in 2017 happened, and afterwards as well. Very, very privileged to be here, and I would like to utilize this opportunity to highlight what happened not only in the hands of Israeli occupation forces, but also what happened to me when I arrived here in Canada. So that's for me, and we can carry on to, is that only the introduction?
Marie.
To Marie?
Yeah, and I'd like to introduce in more detail Marie Tota, who is a nurse who has also returned from the flotilla experience and interactions with both Israeli military, government, and also Canadian military. Perhaps not government as yet, but hopefully there will be some response. Marie.
Thank you. So yes, I am a registered nurse, a community organizer, and this spring I was a participant and a medic on the Global Smooth Flotilla. I was intercepted in the first interception of April 29th and 30th, and I was a ground liaison for after the second interception, assisting and liaising between the Canadian ground team as well as the participants that were abducted in the second interception of May 18th and 19th.
Thank you. And on my far right is my colleague, Senator Pao Wu, who has provided strong and clear leadership in the Senate and outside of the Senate on this issue for some time now.
Thank you, Marilou. I am Yuen, Senator for British Columbia. Very happy to be at this press conference to show my support both to Ko Tinmaung and Marie Tota, to say how happy I am that they are back in Canada safely, together with other Canadian participants in the flotilla, and to show solidarity with them because of the injustice, the harsh treatment, and the lack of support that they are getting from the Canadian government.
Thank you very much, Senator Wu. And to the co-founder of the Rohingya Human Rights Network, and also, I believe, the founder, co-founder of Canadians United Against Hate, Fareed Khan.
Thank you, Senator. I'd especially like to thank you for the efforts of you and your staff in pulling this together on this very important subject. We're gathered at a moment when Canada's moral standing, its claim to defend human rights, international law, and the so-called rules-based order is collapsing under the weight of its own hypocrisy. This is evident in Canada's failure to respond to 984 days of genocide in Gaza, and in the refusal of both the Trudeau and Carney governments to act to stop Israel's crimes despite obligations under international law. And it's evident again in the Carney government's failure to act beyond issuing media statements when it learned that Canadians had been abducted and tortured by Israel, Canadians who put their lives on the line to help Palestinians who have been brutalized since long before this genocide began, as our government has refused to take action. The activists from more than 40 nations with the Samud Flotilla were teachers, nurses, students, retirees, human rights activists, ordinary people showing extraordinary courage. They sailed into international waters carrying humanitarian aid and the conviction that Palestinians' lives matter and that never again must apply universally. Among them were a group of brave Canadians, two of who are with us today, who believe so deeply in human rights that they risk what our leaders would not: their own lives, safety, and liberty. As you've heard, they were abducted by Israeli forces in what legal experts have described as an act of state piracy. They were tasered, tortured, sexually assaulted, and raped. They were subjected to abuse and humiliation that echo the horrors inflicted on civilians during World War II by the Nazis, something that Palestinians have endured for decades. These Canadians were targeted not because they broke the law, but because they upheld it. And where was Canada, the country that claims to defend human rights and champion international
Recording
law?
in progress.
It did not stand with its own citizens. It imposed no penalties when it learned of their torture. And despite repeated requests, neither Mark Carney nor Anita Anand have agreed to meet with these Canadians. Unlike in Australia, as the Senator mentioned, where cabinet ministers have met with their citizens who were tortured and have launched a police investigation. And as these volunteers were being brutalized, Canada continued to allowing Canadian-made weapons and components to be sold to Israel through the United States, even as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, B'Tselem, Physicians for Human Rights Israel, the International Association of Genocide Scholars, UN bodies, and hundreds of other scholars and jurists around the world have all identified as genocide being committed in Gaza. Canada cannot claim innocence or neutrality as its weapons help arm the very state that brutalized Canadian citizens. It cannot maintain business as usual with a nation carrying out a genocide that has killed a conservatively estimated 100,000 Palestinians, displaced over 2 million, and buried hundreds of thousands under Gaza's rubble. It can't claim to uphold the Genocide Convention while ignoring it by refusing to act to stop genocide, which is one of the obligations under that treaty. Marie, and the volunteers of the Samud Flotilla showed us what moral clarity looks like. They showed us what never again means when it's lived, not recited annually as political theater. Tinmaung, a Rohingya Canadian whose parents survived genocide, and Marie Tota recognized those patterns in Gaza. Both sailed on the flotilla because they knew the consequences when the world looks away. And yet Canada's response to their torture and that of other Canadians was a press release, a social media statement by the Prime Minister, and a slap on the wrist for the Israeli ambassador. No sanctions, no arms embargo, no suspension of trade, no justice. Because of these actions, many human rights activists believe that Canada has forfeited its claim to be among the moral nations of the world. And as a Canadian, I'm deeply ashamed that my country has armed and enabled a genocidal state. A nation that arms genocide is complicit in genocide. A country that refuses to sanction a genocidal state and its leaders is not a champion of human rights, nor a defender of international law. If Canada wishes to reclaim any moral standing, it must impose a full arms embargo on Israel, sanction Israeli political and military leaders, suspend the Canada-Israel free trade agreement, support South Africa's genocide case at the ICJ, as NATO allies Belgium, Iceland, the Netherlands, and Spain have done, and expel the Israeli ambassador and recall Canada's ambassador from Israel. Also, we must recognize that the courage of ordinary people, not the decrees of leaders, is what keeps the flames of human rights burning. The flotilla volunteers did that and upheld the principles that Canada claims to stand for. But our government, to its everlasting shame, has betrayed them. Thank you.
Would you like me to add? Yeah.
I'm going to ask Ko to add personal observations, and then I will ask Marie to do the same thing.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am, and thank you once again. Thank you, Friedberg, for a powerful introduction. So I will not take too much time. I'll just go through what I, my participation and what I endured and what happened to me after I returned to Canada. So I was in a peaceful humanitarian mission. We were all civilians from different walks of life, carrying humanitarian supplies. I personally purchased baby formula, sanitary pads, and diapers while I was in Turkey. I still have the receipts to them. And we loaded them into these small vessels, small ships that we were sailing in, boats that we were sailing in. Little did we know that within just 2.5 days of sailing, we would be abducted by the Israeli occupation forces in international waters, 200 miles away from our destination. We were just somewhere around close to Cyprus that the Israeli occupation forces came on board, abducted us, strip searched us, and then took us into their detention. I was detained for more than 96 hours, first into a military ship, and then taken into their port, and then into their prisons. All this while, we were beaten. I was tasered, kicked, punched. I witnessed people with broken nose, with broken teeth, with fractured ribs. I saw people who had the dogs unleashed on them. These are big canine dogs. They took off their mouth guards and unleashed the dogs on them. I, along with all my comrades, we were left without water and food, very minimal water. We were not allowed to sleep. There were gunshots, rifle shots, torture screams of people coming in every other hour while we were trying to just recover from our own injuries after being beaten and tasered. So all this while I moved from one station, let's say from the ship to the port to the prison, and each of these stations in between, I was ridiculed as saying, your last name is Ahmed, you're a Muslim, sometimes being called a dog, sometimes a pig, just after saying Ahmed Muslim. Many people ask me, where were you born in Canada? Or where are you really from Canada? And this extent of this, and I also noticed discrimination amongst participants. So people who are from quote unquote third world countries or from southern states, from Malaysia and Indonesia, were treated even worse. People of different skin color, darker skin color, were treated even worse than people of fairer skin color. All this horror unfolding before my eyes, and I thought it would end when I finished my ordeal, my nightmare in Israel. But no, that was not the case. When I came to Canada, I was taken right at Pearson Airport, where I frequent all the time. That's my hometown. I was taken away from right at the exit point by customs officers and a whole bunch of people in uniform, including Peel Regional Police officers, to which I, for some time, I thought I had flashbacks of getting beaten again, because that's exactly what happened when they took you to the torture room, they call it, in the detention ship. You were surrounded by 5 armed to the teeth military personnel who kicked, punched, and tasered you. So good that they did not kick, punch, and taser me at Pearson, but that treatment, being taken outside and told that you are a threat to public safety and you cannot remain in the premises, and threatened that if I do not leave, I would be detained. I would be taken in the cop cars. There were 5 police cars and 2 airport security vehicles waiting for me outside. I wasn't even allowed to go exit into the terminals. I begged to them that my mom is waiting for me. She hasn't seen me for the last 1.5 months. She's devastated. I didn't tell her before leaving for obvious reasons. She would not let. So despite of all that, they were adamant that I had to leave the premises without any negotiation, without any questions. And so I was transported outside of Pearson to a place. They said, go to a cafe, go anywhere. And so eventually I said, how about a mosque? And I was taken to a mosque. And that is where I was forcibly forced to meet with my friends and family who had been waiting for me after being away from home for 1.5 months for no reason. Like, what had I done wrong by landing in Pearson? Is it because I had gone on a humanitarian aid mission to Gaza? Was that my biggest crime? Had I gone to a weapons sales event, perhaps I would have been welcomed with a red carpet. So I need to have these answers. I keep questioning myself even today, after all the nightmare, after everything for which I get flashbacks for in Israel. Why did I have to go through the same thing here in Canada? Why hasn't Prime Minister Carney answered our request, myself and 14 of us that in the Canadian delegation that went to the aid mission to Gaza? Why hasn't Prime Minister Carney's office replied to any of us for a meeting, where else our Australian counterparts already have had meetings and they are going into investigation, like Senator McPhedran mentioned? Why are we still shipping weapons components to Israel via the United States? Why are we enabling a genocide, knowing that the military in Israel does not only terrorize and mass slaughter its own people, but also people from Canada, also aid workers, also doctors? I mean, how much there have been other media conferences here where Canadian doctors have visited Gaza and talk about the horrors they have witnessed. Yet we continue to ship weapons components to Israel. Why are our IOF officers, we know about Israeli occupation forces personnel that are roaming free here in Canada, in Toronto, in Ottawa, in Montreal, going around and giving talks at different events, including universities? Why does this happen while you have, former Rwandan officers, for example, that were charged and that were tried under Magnitsky Act, but we do not apply the same standards to IOF personnel here in Canada that have dual citizenship, while we know that it is illegal for Canadians to serve in another country's military? These were not military, personnel, in my opinion, after having gone through this ordeal. They are a group of thugs. The way they treated us, I return only in these clothes. You see, everything was taken away from me. My dignity, my own personal protection, slapped around and ridiculed and sexually assaulted while I'm naked, and only return in these prison garb. Why, after all of that, Israeli occupation forces personnel are roaming free in Canada? I need answers to all this. This is why I'm here.
This is actually why we are all here for this media conference. I would now, appreciating how difficult it is, as a feminist lawyer, I have worked with sexual assault, sexual abuse survivors for well over 40 years. And I just want to thank and acknowledge both Co and Marie for their willingness to come before you today and to speak so personally. There is a cost to this, and I hope that there is an understanding of the need to have this truth be known is overriding the desire that survivors usually have to just not talk about it after it's happened. So I thank you both, and I ask Marie now to make your comments.
Thank you. I am one of 14 Canadians that undertook the mission to sail to Gaza, to break the illegal siege, and to deliver humanitarian aid to people undergoing forced starvation and an imposed famine at the hands of the Zionist regime. The boat I was on was named Holy Blue, and I sailed from Italy towards Gaza until my abduction by the IOF on April 30th from international waters, 45 nautical miles away from Greek territorial waters, and almost 700 nautical miles from the shores of occupied Palestine. It was on the evening of April 29th that the interference from the IDF began. It started with radio and communications jamming, a military ship that was visible in the distance, and drones flying overhead. After several hours of this, around 3 a.m, a rigid inflatable boat approached Holy Blue at high speed with a floodlight, while I and 10 other crew members sat together with our life jackets and our hands raised above our head. A group of 6 to 10 soldiers with weapons and full military gear, wearing the insignia of the Israeli Navy, boarded our boat, immediately destroyed our live stream camera, and began yelling commands at us. We were searched, made to sit on the bow of the sailboat, some of us with our hands up, some of us with our hands zip-tied together. Eventually, my crew and I were made to board the rib and were transferred to a military ship where an open-air prison was fashioned for us out of shipping containers and barbed wire. We were held on this prison ship for 2 days, where 200 of us were both tortured and made to witness the torture of others until we were released on the island of Crete. As a healthcare professional, the injuries that I saw on my comrades, on my friends, on the people that I have gotten to know and love are things that I normally see in an emergency department from somebody coming in from a car accident, from a trip and fall, from falling down the stairs. But all of these things were imposed by the IOF, and they were done to us. And quite frankly, I feel as though I received the lightest of this horrific treatment. And that the harshest of it was reserved for anybody who identified as Muslim, people of color, people of different ethnicities, people from the global South. After 2 days of detention, when we were released in Crete, we had nothing but any of the clothes that the IOF did not take from us. Some people did not have shoes. We were sharing sweaters because some people had only light t-shirts or tank tops. And we had endured extreme heat in the daytime without proper shelter or shade, with inadequate water, and then extreme cold temperatures at nighttime, where our sleeping areas were flooded as we slept on the ground. Even our passports were initially with the Greek authorities, and we weren't able to obtain those for over 8 hours after our arrival. We had no money, no cell phones, we didn't speak the language, and we had no way to contact our loved ones to let them know that we were still alive. I would like to point out that I and another Canadian citizen were abducted at that time on April 30th. And 2 citizens being abducted by a foreign military is apparently an inadequate number of Canadians to warrant comment by Prime Minister Carney. After my interception, I continued to work on the ground, assist with logistics, and I eventually became the on-the-ground liaison between the Canadian ground team here in Canada and the other 12 Canadian participants who were abducted in the second interception in Istanbul, Turkey. I saw their injuries firsthand, and I can say with absolute certainty that the level of brutality was escalated during the second interception by the IOF. On Thursday, May 28th, after 14 hours of travel, I arrived back in Toronto, landing at Pearson Airport, where my family and friends had organized a gathering to welcome me home. Once I checked in with my passport, I was pulled out of the customs line by police and told that it was for my safety. The same phrase that the IOF used when they told me to bring my medication off the boat, which was then denied to me after multiple requests by myself and by other people. They told me that there were people protesting what I had done. I was then escorted by 6 police officers to pick up my checked luggage, and they waited for me to retrieve it and then rushing me out through a side door. I went from being kidnapped by armed soldiers in uniform to armed police in uniforms escorting me through a hallway out of the airport. I later found out that those who came to greet me were told by police that they were not allowed to hold banners or flags, despite others in the airport being able to hold them and welcome their loved ones. They were also threatened with arrests and trespass orders. The response from all levels of government across Canada has generally been one of two things: either complete silence and inaction, ignoring the 10,000 Palestinian prisoners experiencing even worse torture than what I had witnessed, the killings of children, the bombings of hospitals, and the myriad of war crimes perpetrated by the genocidal Zionist regime, or empty and hollow condemnations of their actions without any real consequences, while at the same time repressing the voices of those who are in solidarity with the people of Palestine through the weaponization of community safety and claims of anti-Semitism. As a group, I and the 14 others that sailed have requested a meeting with Prime Minister Carney and Foreign Affairs Minister Anand, to which we are still awaiting a response. If the Canadian government, in fact, stands on the side of human rights, human dignity, and international law, I and my comrades make the following demands: to call for the release of the 10,000 Palestinian prisoners being held hostage and tortured by Israel, to take all means necessary to immediately end the genocide of the Palestinian people, to adopt immediate sanctions against Israel, including the termination of the Canada-Israel Free Trade Agreement, to adopt a comprehensive arms and military embargo on Israel, and to conduct a full investigation into the military attacks on the 14 Canadian citizens, 13 of whom were abducted, and one of whom was left in a nautical death trap by the IOF in international waters on April 29th, 30th, and May 18th and 19th. Thank you, and Free Palestine.
Thank you, Marie. I'm mindful of the time, so I want to check in with our moderator. Do we have questions, folks that are waiting?
Question on the line here. Yes.
Okay. Do we have time for Senator Wu to speak and then to return to the questions?
Let's go straight to the question.
I can't.
Are you
Let
okay?
me bring him on and ask him.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thanks.
Let me bring him on and ask him. Dylan, they're asking if you would like to have an additional statement, or you need to ask a question now and then hear the statement.
Sorry, I might just ask a question now, just not to break the flow. Sorry about that. I guess I'm just wondering about the criminal investigations Australia is doing. My understanding is that these pertain strictly to allegations of sexual assault by Israeli officials. In today's press conference and the other ones that I've heard, we've heard allegations of mistreatment by Israeli forces, the part about the boat being left there. I don't know if we've heard Canadian participants allege that they themselves were sexually assaulted. So I just wanted to clarify if that is one of the allegations. And I know it's sensitive, but any details, like how many Canadians are alleging sexual mistreatment, sexual assault, like what detail you'd be able to share on that?
I think Co would like to respond.
Yes. So I will talk only about myself, and I'm mindful of not going into too much details. It's just it's not something pleasant you want to recall. I was stripped naked on several occasions, touched unnecessarily, and ridiculed and slapped around while I was in the naked position. So you can make what you want to make of that. You mentioned about mistreatment, and that's a very, very soft word to say. We were tortured. The first thing that I got as soon as I entered the torture container, it's called. So you enter the ship, the torture ship. I was singled out from all of my comrades. I was made to go into the kneeling position, and then a soldier came in and butted me with the back of his rifle to indicate that I need to go more down, and then butted me even harder so that I go until my belly, and then they put cold water on me, and then I was stripped naked, and then I was taken into this torture room where the first thing that I got was a kick into my groins. I'm not going to go into the details. And then there were 5 soldiers who beat me, literally beat me for I don't know how long in that dark container, including tasering me all over. That's only my account. There are 12 other participants whose accounts you would take, and these are not just mistreatment. These are torture. I went through a concussion, or I don't know what, because I did not have the tools, I didn't have the medical help, but I begged for a Tylenol. No Tylenol was given to me. Even after seeing a doctor, an Israeli doctor, at the prison, 36 hours, 48 hours later, I saw one, and I asked him, pleaded to him, I just need a paracetamol. He said he would give, but nothing was given. There was a comrade beside me who had a flesh of his cheek taken off because the dogs were unleashed on him. He had begged for just some antiseptic to wipe that off, and that was not given. So figure what you would call that if it's just mistreatment. So that is my part. I would leave to Marie if she has to add anything else.
Thank you, Ko. And I remember being with you in Istanbul. And I remember being at the hotel where people came with bruises on their faces, with broken ribs, with broken vertebrae in their neck, broken bones, broken elbows. The torture that we endured should not become salacious because it was sexual in nature.
Mm-hmm.
Violations and assaults don't only count if they are sexual in nature, although that also did happen. And so once again, there does need to be a full investigation by the Canadian government into what was done to us. Because all of it matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both. Ko.
Thank you. And as a follow-up question, I'd just like some clarity on what complaints or investigations currently exist about Pearson Airport. You mentioned aggressive questioning. You mentioned being branded a security risk. I'm not sure how long these encounters were. I'm not sure if that was like a detention or if this was a brief, harsh questioning and then the being escorted off the premises, being branded a security risk. And I'm just trying to clarify what was done by CBSA employees and what was done by Peel Police, and what is the status of any complaints filed with anyone at this point?
And before that's answered, I would like to add to that question by Dylan Robertson, and that is to say that we also have Pearson Security involved in this. And this is federal jurisdiction. We're not even going to go to the Peel Police, but federal jurisdiction. So it's more than appropriate that we're here today with those of us who work at the federal level, and we're asking the same questions. I think, Fareed, did you have some information to share?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that lawyers have become involved. We have a lawyer doing some research into what happened at Pearson. And just so it's made clear, this didn't happen over like 15 or 20 minutes. Ko was detained for more than 3 hours and intimidated and threatened for more than 3 hours by security personnel and police. So there really needs to be an investigation into what I perceive as a deep-seated anti-Palestinian racism at Pearson Airport, as well as within Peel Police. And this is not just isolated pockets. We have seen this in various players in the political class who do not have sympathy for the Palestinian cause. And we need to consider what kind of country we want to be and what are we going to do to eliminate this deep-seated racism within our society.
Yeah, I think it would be good to hear from Senator.
Sure, yeah. Well, I want to thank Mr. Robertson for the question and underscore the point made by both Ko and Marie that while it may be salacious, to use your word, for the media and the public to focus on sexual abuse and sexual violence of the detainees, fundamental rights were violated from the very beginning of their ordeal, from the interception in international waters, the occupation of their boats, the removal of their rights to contact loved ones and consular support, and of course, the abuse, the physical and mental abuse that they suffered. So we should not somehow try to minimize or poo-poo the concerns that have been raised because you haven't heard the worst of the threats and the worst of the abuse that they face. And this is precisely why they want to meet with the Prime Minister, precisely why they want to meet with the Foreign Minister, so that they can, with some privacy, tell the full story, and our authorities can then conduct the investigations that are necessary. Everything that's been said today should be more than enough for us to take this extremely seriously and to conduct the investigation that's needed. The sort of investigation that Australia is doing, perhaps the Australian investigation is not even going far enough. As Mr. Robertson has said, they're focusing on the sexual violence. But let's remember, violations of rights and law have been committed throughout the process, throughout the ordeal. Thank you.
I would like to ask if Canadians are concerned about the cycle of violence in the Middle East. What can they do to help break the cycle of violence that's going on between all parties involved?
Okay. I would like to take that. Senator Wu.
Well, the first thing is to be aware of the efforts by Canadians, the individuals here, and the other 12 participants in the flotilla to try and provide assistance and draw attention to the genocide, be aware of the efforts by NGOs, human rights groups, humanitarian organizations, charities, who are trying to do what they can to help Palestinians, but who are being thwarted by the Israeli government at every turn. And with this awareness, ask our government, what are we doing? Are we doing enough? And if we are not doing enough, are we doing things that make us complicit in the gross violations of international humanitarian law that have been demonstrated? This is not just a question of another humanitarian crisis in the world. There are many. The world is in a very bad place. This is a question of fundamental violations, the crime of crimes. And our response to it, the Canadian government's response to it, is not a matter of charity. It's not a matter of whether we have the money to do so. It's a matter of law. And failing to respond appropriately commits the crime of complicity. Is that the company we want to be in? I hope it hasn't been lost on all of you that we have the son of a Rohingya genocide survivor, a family that survived the Rohingya genocide, talking about never again in the way that all of us should be talking about never again. Never again is the term we use for the Holocaust. We say it every year, International Holocaust Remembrance Day, February of each year. We say never again, but we let a genocide in Palestine take place. We have to be serious about never again, not just because it's the right moral thing to do, it is, but also because it's a matter of our obligation and our commitment to international law.
May I quickly add to that? Thank you. You asked about what Canadians, individual Canadians, can do. The government, the state of Israel is not on its own. It receives weapons from both Canada and the United States. They use technology developed by corporations in order to use weapons. They use drones. They use AI technology to identify Palestinians and to target them. And those companies are complicit in the genocide of the Palestinian people. McDonald's offered free food to the IOF after October 7th. Starbucks has targeted people, unions who have organized, their workers who have organized in order to support the Palestinian people. All of these are companies that we give our money to, who then funnel that money to the state of Israel. Indigo Books has a foundation that supports IOF soldiers. So if Canadians really want to make a difference, they can very easily make a difference with their pocketbooks and where they spend their money and where that money is directed to. And there are so many alternatives out there. There are local bookstores. There are local coffee chains. There are local restaurants. There are alternative technology platforms that don't support genocide. And it is literally one of the easiest things that we can do is to boycott, to divest, and to call on the government to sanction a genocidal regime. Thank you.
Can I just add one? Parliament is ending, and MPs are going to be heading back to their ridings for the summer barbecue circuit. If there's one thing I would ask Canadians to do is I would ask them to confront their MPs in their home ridings, asking them why, and this particularly with regard to Liberal and Conservative MPs, why are they supporting a genocidal state? Why is Canada still sending weapons to Israel? Why has Canada not recognized that genocide is taking place despite the declarations by the Yuen, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Israeli groups, Physicians for Human Rights Israel and B'Tselem, and the International Association of Genocide Scholars. Even Israeli Holocaust scholars, Omer Bartov, Amos Goldberg, Raz Segal, Barry Trachtenberg, have designated what Israel is doing in Gaza as genocide. And yet Canada still has not recognized that they have not even used the word in their official statements. We, as I said earlier, we have to decide what kind of country we want to be. Do we want to be a country that's on the right side of the law, on the right side of justice, or are we going to be a follower and only take the action that's needed when everybody else has basically done the right thing? Our NATO allies, Belgium, Spain, Turkey, and as well as Ireland, which the Prime Minister visited just a few days ago, they have all signed on to the South African genocide case at the ICJ. Why hasn't Canada? If it wants to stand with these moral nations. That's what we should be doing. And that's what Canadians should be asking of our MPs, pressure them, because that's the only thing that's going to change the position that Canada has on this issue.
Thank you, Fareed. I think we've been asked to bring this to a close. Yes. I will make one observation about a disconnect, and I hope this will be heard by management in our media corporations in this country. Everything said here will not be conveyed to Canadians unless reporters, journalists are allowed to report with this information. And I think we have seen a disconnect, particularly by media owned by large corporations. And it is both my hope and my request that there be some additional consideration to sharing this information with Canadians and to allow Canadians to decide, once they have the information, as to what it is that they wish to do. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, everyone. Merci, miigwech.